All right. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is the sixth installment of this year's Western Lake Erie Basin Advisory Group's 2026 winter webinar series. So we host these in the winter as a way to carry over in between the conferences that we host every summer in Adrian in June. So this series will continue with one more session on April 7th at noon. And you can find all of our webinars on this link that I'm going to post in the chat. So we record everything, and there's past recordings from the last couple years here if you're curious about specific topics. So my name is Allison. I'm the program manager for the Western Lake Erie Basin Advisory Group. This community group works collaboratively with Michigan's quality of life agencies, so that's MDARD, EGLE, and DNR, to inform how the state implements projects aimed at managing nutrient pollution and to improve waters flowing into Lake Erie. So the advisory group and this webinar series are generously funded by the Herb Family Foundation, and we thank them for their continued support of this work. So feel free to post any comments or questions you have in the chat while our speakers are presenting, but we're also going to have ample time at the end for you to unmute and ask questions. And we look forward to your engagement later in the session. All right, so I'm going to pass it off to Katie to get started.
Great. Thanks everybody for joining this morning. I'll just start with a quick introduction to who I am. So I'm Katie Grantham. I'm a planner in SEMCOG's Environment and Infrastructure Group. And we'll talk a little bit more about what SEMCOG is in just a minute. But I do a lot of work with local communities, helping them plan for climate resiliency, helping them to figure out where and how they can implement green infrastructure. And maybe I'll pass it off to Bailey real quick to introduce herself as well.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Bailey Pacienza, and I'm also a planner in SEMCOG's Environment and Infrastructure Group. I work alongside Katie on a lot of climate resiliency work. I'm our GIS person, which we'll talk more about that with the tools in a bit. We help communities with their stormwater runoff, with their flooding resiliency, green infrastructure, air quality, everything under the sun. So Katie will talk more about that in a bit, but yes, thank you all for being here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Bailey. I know this is a little bit of a different webinar today. I think a lot of times you guys are focused in like the agricultural space or maybe specifically looking at Western Lake Erie Basin. But I think we have a lot of connections. So I'm really happy that Allison invited us here to speak today. We've got a lot of tools and a lot of great resources that I'm hoping we can share with you today that will be useful in your work. We at SEMCOG work across the Southeast Michigan region, so I think there's a lot of relevance and connections. So we'll just kind of dive into what we're going to talk about today. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I'll give a quick introduction to SEMCOG, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the development of this flooding and resilience plan that we're doing for Southeast Michigan, and some things that you might want to be aware of to connect in with the development of that plan because it's relevant to all of our counties and communities across Southeast Michigan, and I'm sure a lot of us have dealt with flooding. So very relevant topic. And then I'm going to hand it over to Bailey to talk about these two really cool tools that start to get at project specific, what is my impact and, what are the cost savings of doing some of this work. So that's our eco planning tool and our stormwater planning tool. And then we'll open it up and just kind of have a discussion around these things. And if there's items that you think of that SEMCOG could maybe help with during the presentations, we'd love to talk about that at our Q&A. Okay, so you might be like, I don't know what SEMCOG is, and that's fair. We're the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. And you can see in the map here, this is our service area. So we've got about 86 cities, 16 villages, 66 townships, and 7 counties that we're working with on a consistent basis. And we also work a lot with the community colleges and intermediate school districts throughout the region. And really, our goal is to provide intergovernmental, technical, and planning data to different communities across the region to help them make decisions within their communities. When that comes to the planning side, when that comes to the implementation of projects, when it comes to policies, both local and at the state level, that's really where we're involved. And overall, our mission is that all people of Southeast Michigan benefit from a connected, thriving region of small towns, dynamic urban centers, active waterfronts, diverse neighborhoods, premier educational institutions, and abundant agricultural, recreational, and natural areas. And so we are on SEMCOG's Environment and Infrastructure team. It's a small but mighty group, and we work on a lot of different topics. So if you're ever curious about more of the work that we do, or if there's something that you are hoping we might work on, definitely reach out to us. Some of the main things we do are green infrastructure planning and implementation. So both looking at the small scale, rain gardens, bioswales, as well as these really large systems that we'll talk more about today that can hold water and help mitigate some of the flooding that we're seeing in our region. We also do a lot of work with water infrastructure coordination and asset management. So really figuring out what do you have in your community, what is its age, how do you start to think about replacing it if that's needed, all of that good work. And then we work on climate resiliency. We do a lot with data analysis. We have a lot of data at our organization. And we also do public education. So it doesn't, just end with us at the local government level. It really takes bringing the public in to make change across our region. So that's what we're trying to do. This is just an example of some of our plans and data resources that we have specifically around green infrastructure, agriculture, all of those good topics. I would definitely encourage you all to check out our green dashboard. Green stands for growing our resilience, equity, and economy with nature. And the dashboard we put together a few years ago, we're in the process of updating a lot of the data sets in there, but it's got a lot of good information when it comes to where is the current green infrastructure network, where are current and future conservation or agricultural lands, where could that be based? It's got a lot of good data when it comes to policies and zoning ordinances. So if somebody's done a climate action plan or has implemented a green infrastructure ordinance, you can check those out at the green dashboard. And really the goal of this program was to set targets so that we can actually move forward with doing this work, not just have a plan that kind of sits on a shelf, really trying to track progress over time. So that's what that living document is. We also have a wetland mapper for our region if you're interested in wetlands. It's got a lot of good information on where our current wetlands are and the different ecosystem services that they provide. You can kind of filter based on those. We also have our green infrastructure vision and our low impact development manual. So if you're very interested in where should I implement green infrastructure, how do I do this? Those are some great resources as well. But today I want to talk to you about this new plan that we're doing, which is our flooding and resilience plan, and really kind of set the stage because we're hoping to get involvement across the region. And so happy to be here today to kind of pull everybody in to talk about this because urban flooding and rural flooding can be very different. And we want everybody to let us know what they need in their communities and how this plan can support that work. So you all have probably heard about some of the flooding that we've had in Southeast Michigan. Here's a few good pictures. A lot of times when I bring this up at a conference, people will be like, who experienced flooding in, what year? And everybody's like, oh, the 2014 flood or, oh, the 2021 floods where the highway closed. So it's had a large impact on our region. It impacts people's accessibility, especially in some of our urban areas where we have combined sewers. We've had basement backups. And even in, all of our different communities, I think we're figuring out how do we mitigate the impacts of this because it really is happening to everybody and it impacts livelihood. it impacts our economy. There's a lot of different reasons why flooding is important. And so to kind of set the stage with a little bit more data behind that, Michigan has had 4 federal disaster declarations in the last 5 years due to flooding. So it's definitely something we're seeing that's impacting the region. And also what we're finding when we really look into the data behind this is that the 100-year rain event of now, you know, if you know that terminology, is happening multiple times in a single year. And to break that down, what that really means is that on a yearly basis, we're seeing an increase in the frequency of our storms as well as the intensity. So we're not just getting, you know, rain over a 24-hour period, we're getting several inches of rain in a 1 or 2 hour period. And at the end of the day, it's hard for our systems to handle that. So kind of getting to why stormwater is important. Municipalities face a lot when they're dealing with it. Flooding causes property damage, there's service disruptions. There can be a lot of impacts to water quality. So when we have a lot of flooding and our infrastructure systems can't handle it, sometimes we're discharging to the river. That impacts, you know, public health and recreation and how we're able to interact with our water resources. And especially when you think of it, if everything is draining to Lake Erie, when we have these events, it's important for us to think about the impacts of water quality on that body of water. Beyond that, we have aging infrastructure systems. So, you know, a lot of our pipes were designed 70 years ago, and so they were able to handle the water at that time. It's not necessarily that they're failing now. It's more just that we are having more rain and our pipe systems can't handle that. And so figuring out how to in place that infrastructure is really costly, and it's something that communities are kind of struggling with. So what do we need to do to kind of move forward? So that's really where this flooding and resilience plan comes into play. It's funded through Federal Highways Protect program. Protect is a long acronym that I'm not sure many of us remember, but really focus on developing these resilience improvement plans. We also have funding from the Herb Family Foundation, as well as funding from the State of Michigan's Department of Transportation SPR dollars. So those are kind of the funding sources that are all coming together to help us develop this plan. And the plan is to really build a pathway to resilience. What are the things that we need to do now, in 5 years from now, in 30 years from now, and 50 years from now, so that our communities are resilient to flooding? And there's a lot of ways that we can do that. Part of it starts with building local community readiness. So making sure that when there's a flooding event, communities know what to do. They're able to inform the public. The public can take action on their own property. It's also providing tools to empower action. So what do local communities need to really move the bar forward? We're also coordinating on regional resilience. So I'm sure I'm not the first person to come and say, hey, we're doing this resilience project. There's a lot of folks in the region, whether it be Great Lakes Water Authority, whether it be the Army Corps of Engineers, whether it be studies at Wayne State and U of M. A lot of people are focused on this work, and it's important that we coordinate so that we're not recreating the wheel. We really want to make sure that if we're developing a piece of data, somebody else can use that and vice versa, and making sure that our projects align. So that's a lot of what the plan will do. And then again, it really comes back to public engagement. So inspiring an engaged and informed public. What are the things that they need to know more about flooding? What the impacts are, what they might need to know at home, where is flooding okay versus where it's not. There's a lot of education to be had when it comes to this. So these are all kind of components that the plan will hit on. The biggest thing that the plan will do is develop a list of projects that could realistically and feasibly be implemented now and into the future. So that's really building our bridge to resilience, somewhat literally. What are the types of highway projects that we need to do? What are the types of great infrastructure projects that we need to do? Where do we need to update our plans, our zoning ordinances, all of that? And any project that goes into this plan is eligible for lower match through Protect. So all of these projects we identify can be funded through this protect funding source as long as it continues to remain at the federal level, with the hope that that will help to implement a lot of these projects and remove some of the barriers that it takes to get some of that funding moving forward. So I'll just quickly go into, I think the first thing I want to let people know is that we have a call for projects that will be coming up in June of this year. And what we really want to know are the types of projects that your community is interested in funding. We want to know where those are, and we want to know their impacts. So if we implement this project, what are some of the vulnerabilities that we're addressing, and how are we reducing those vulnerabilities by implementing that project? And then really how SEMCOG can help move the needle forward. So some projects might be existing, some projects, I think I have it on this next slide. Some projects might be existing, so really explicitly already addressing resilience and flooding. Some existing projects will look in vulnerable areas and how they would benefit from this work. And then we'll also have a list of new resilience projects. So part of what we'll be doing is going through community and regional plans to figure out what are some of the projects that maybe have been implemented, maybe still need to be implemented, and then hearing from all of you, what are some of the projects that you want in your community? Do you want to put in a wetland somewhere to mitigate the impacts of flooding? That is a plan, or that is a project that could go within this plan. So again, these are just some of the project categories. And as we get closer to late June, when we'll put out the call for projects, we'll let you all know what is eligible. And if you have questions about whether a project is eligible, reach out to us. Chances are it probably is. It's a pretty wide margin of different projects that can be implemented, but at least on the transportation side, we're looking more at those like hard gray infrastructure projects. So where can we update bridges, highway and road resilience? Maybe if somebody is replacing a road, they're also implementing some green infrastructure benefits, or maybe they're increasing the size of the pipe that's under their road system. A lot of different options there. We'll also look at like resilience planning and data-driven decision making. So that's more about communities stepping back, looking at their master plans, looking at their zoning ordinances and saying, is resilience really encompassed within these? Are there new maybe policies or regulations that we need to implement to kind of move the needle forward here? We're also looking at things like intelligent transportation systems. So thinking a little bit more about how we can get some real-time data that will help us make decisions faster. And then especially emergency response and disaster recovery infrastructure. When we do have flooding, because we probably will, what are the things that we need to do to be more prepared? On the stormwater side, there's a lot of different work. Again, we've got the planning sector, thinking more about operations and maintenance. Are the systems we have in place now actually working? Thinking more about system optimization, again, starting to pull in some of that technology that allows us to make real-time decisions. Thinking more about gray infrastructure, so just increasing the size of a stormwater pipe, letting water run through that, and then green infrastructure, especially at the large scale. These large scale projects are really where we're going to be able to get the water quantity benefits. But our small scale little bioswales and things like that will help us with water quality. So we can kind of work in tandem with both of those to build the path forward. Just to quickly run through some other aspects of this tool, one of the things that's required by Federal Highway is to conduct a vulnerability assessment. So really getting a better picture of where are the vulnerabilities in our region. We do have this flood risk tool that's on our website. Definitely go check it out if you're interested. It looks specifically at where roads, bridges, culverts, and streams are at high risk of flooding. You can filter by county or community and get the top 5 road segments that are vulnerable to flooding. You can also kind of take a deeper dive into some of the data. So what are some of the things that cause that road to be flooded? So what we're doing as part of this analysis is really updating this tool. So it won't just look at flooding, it will also look at coastal erosion as well as heat vulnerability. So where are some of the areas in our region that might be impacted by flooding as well as extreme heat days? And then we're adding additional assets. So this is really our classic transportation system, But there's people who don't drive cars within our region, and we want to make sure that they have access to bus stops, that they have access to trails and bike networks that get them to where they need to be. So we'll be adding both of those as assets on the tool. This tool update will be ready sometime this summer. If you're interested, we have a task force meeting in April that will really kind of talk more about this update and show some of the preliminary results. We're also, again, identifying large-scale nature-based solutions. This is probably the most interest to many of you. We did a desktop assessment to figure out, based on the data that we have, where could some of these areas be? And now we're working with local communities to really ground truth that, or make sure that if we didn't capture something based on the data that we have, that their locations where they want green infrastructure to happen are added to this dashboard. We'll be developing 4 concept plans as part of this work. Concept plans, I think, are really helpful because it builds a stronger grant application. If we're able to do a concept plan, we can start to get an idea of, what the cost would be, what some of the barriers might be when it comes to permitting, or if there are utilities there, or if it's even feasible. So we're developing 4 right now, 1 within each watershed, but the hope is to get more funding to do more of this work later so we can really help communities all across the region move this forward. And then later this summer, another thing to be aware of is that we'll be doing a lot of public outreach and education. We're hoping to get into communities to really figure out, these are some of the things that we and the experts across the region have identified, but does that resonate with you and your community? What are some of the things that you might want to see? If we're doing, back to that example of a wetland project, do you want us to put a trail around it? Is there a bike path that we connect to? What are some of the things that community members want to see that we can help them implement through this work? So we'll be going out and doing community meetings. We'll have a survey that we'll publish coming out, I think, April 15th. So we'll be sure to send that to all of you to really start to get feedback on what do people want to see? How are they impacted by flooding? How can they help us build that pathway to resilience in the future? So this is kind of our timeline that we're working with. We're in the February-March timeline. We've had a lot of topic-specific workshops. We've had task force meetings. The task force is really just a group of, professionals and experts from across our region that's helped guiding this work forward. Again, this summer and into fall, we'll be doing more of that public engagement, all with the hopes of getting this plan ready by March so that it will be approved by our General Assembly. And at that point, we'll really be rolling out how we can help communities move these projects forward. So with that, it's important. I've talked a lot today about kind of building this green infrastructure network throughout Southeast Michigan. I think we know that just based on how costly it is and challenging it is for communities to update their pipe systems, we will really have to depend on our green infrastructure systems to mitigate some of the flooding, to help improve water quality. And we want to do that in, ways that really benefit people. So I'm going to hand it over to Bailey next because we have some really great tools that you can use right now if you're thinking about doing some of this work that will really start to get at the bigger picture and connect into our larger network. So with that, I'm actually going to stop my share and hand it over to you, Bailey.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. I'm going to get my screen pulled up here. Share. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Looks good.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So today I'm going to be talking a bit about some of our tools, like Katie mentioned, that are really geared for communities, folks who want to implement green infrastructure or really any kind of project that might have an impact on the surrounding environment. So the first one is a really cool interactive tool, which I think we're going to be having a little bit of a interactive session at the end of this webinar, but this is the eco planning tool. So this tool is public facing and it incorporates recent and new data around the environment, and its goal is to for it to be used in the early planning process. Really, it has a simplified model, and it puts out a detailed but yet, easily understood report that you can, for one, share it with your colleagues, share it with whomever, but also attach it to grant applications to showcase, hey, if I do this project in this area, this is what's going to be impacted. And that could be anything from the water quality, the stormwater runoff, to the air quality. If there's any potential threatened or endangered species in the area, it'll flag that as well. So this tool was developed by Highland Economics as well as CEC, and we had a lot of user testing back and forth with our partners across the region. So that includes MDOT, other consultants, as well as our communities, our counties, and our Southeast Michigan Partners for Clean Water Group. And we utilize these groups to really figure out the tool's user interface, as well as how easy it is to digest this information. And if it's too much all in one go, we really tweaked it to make sure that it fits everyone's needs. So the tool at a glance, again, this tool is really geared to be used for an early planning process to flag potential indicators of this project, as well as the impacts of a surrounding environment. So this tool can be used by planners, developers, conservation organizations, transportation agencies, engineers, or just Joe Schmo off the street who just wants to know, hey, what if I put a trail here? What would happen? I have messed around with the tool myself just to see, oh, there's a parking lot that I don't want to get rid of. I like to see that into a little pocket park. I can see what happens with that. So again, it really calculates the environmental resources impacted by the project, and again, flag potential compliance issues, and also estimates economic valuation of these projects. So part of this tool showcases, hey, I want to develop a certain building at this location. Okay, well, if I want to implement that, how can I mitigate stormwater runoff? The tool offers insights into best management practices. So that includes green infrastructure, like Katie mentioned earlier, anything from a rain garden, a bioswale, or even, full forest wetland restoration. This tool has it all. And it also showcases the cost-saving methods that may be beneficial if you were to implement a best management practice. So this tool was developed using JavaScript and a lot of data on the back end. So we use Python and modeling for its calculations. And then for the tool itself, how you use it, which I will demonstrate in 1 second, but just as an overview, the user just needs to zoom to the project location, put in the size of the project, as well as the amount of impervious surface that may be affected for the project itself. There are some projects on here that, let's say transportation, you might not have 100% impervious area for your transportation project. You can use that little slider bar here to bring that down. And also you can see here the project type. So we have transportation projects, we have multiple new and or redevelopment projects, or restoration projects such as forests or wetlands, as well as BMPs. And then this tool, as I said in the beginning, it's very data heavy. We use a lot of new and up-to-date data for the tool. If anyone is curious about the data sets that we use, feel free to shoot me a message. I'd be more than happy to send over this guidebook here that lists all of our data and resources. And again, just to reiterate, this is a planning tool. So the tool makes a lot of assumptions and generalizations about the size of the practices being implemented. So this tool looks again at the water quality and stormwater runoff. So it utilizes the EPA STEPL tool, which looks at the nutrient load, determines if I were to implement a project here, what would happen to the to the surrounding water quality. Air quality, of course, change in tree cover to estimate air quality effects, and that goes hand in hand with the carbon sequestration. We also offer a recreation aspect as well. So the project area, it automatically creates a buffer area around the project, showcasing, if it's outside of a 10-minute walk to a recreation spot. And then the public safety. So the tool also sets a buffer based on the number of deer collisions within the buffer. And that is a layer within the map as well. So with that being said, I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second, and I'm going to pull up the tool on my screen here. I'm going to show you in real time. I really hope that my computer doesn't crash on me. Okay, looks like you guys can see my screen. So this is the splash screen. So when you go to this website, this is what you see early on, just a step-by-step as to how to use the tool. So you can close out of here. This is what you get when you go on the tool. You can zoom into a location. I'm just going to zoom in, let's say somewhere down here. Let's go to find a parking lot. Okay. Looks like it's a building. Let's go here. So what you want to do for no matter what project you're using or you want to implement, you click on a draw polygon tool, and let's say I want to put in a project right here. So before you finalize your project, you want to make sure you double click that so it's green. On the other side of the screen here, again, we have the new development and the redevelopment or the avoided development. So we have multifamily, single family, commercial, industrial, and institutional. We also have restoration projects, like I showed earlier, forest or wetlands, as well as a transportation project, a BMP installation, and trails. So with this, let's say I want to put in a single family residence here. I want to keep that at 100% impervious. I'm going to hit run, and you can see at the bottom here, we have running, please wait for results. This tool doesn't take no more than 4 minutes to run. This is a relatively small area, so it should be run relatively soon. In the meantime, I want to show you the layer list on the map. So we have flood hazard area, roads with flood risk, culverts with flood risk, and bridges with flood risk. And this goes hand in hand with the flood risk tool that Katie showed earlier. This data will be updated once the flood risk tool data set is updated as well. We have wetlands, wetland opportunities, and that means historical wetland areas that were once wetlands but have been developed over. So what's a good area for potential wetlands, as well as traffic collisions or public safety. So that being said, the tool has ran, awesome, looks great. So you can utilize the output of this tool by using the tabs on top here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on impact. So again, as a disclaimer, just saying this is a preliminary estimate as to the project impacts. It's used in the early decision-making process for implementing a project. So it looks like our site has 0.2 acres, and the total site area is 0.22 acres. So we have a little bit of open space. The tree cover, it's 18.78%, which is well below our tree cover goal, which are for all communities to have 40% tree canopy. So maybe that's something that you would consider, like, oh, okay, well, maybe if I plant some trees here, I could, for one, decrease any heat island effect, as well as maybe uptick the carbon sequestration. And then we have land cover impacts, impervious surface change. So my project itself is 0.2 acres. So that would mean I would put in 0.2 acres of impervious surface. So that's just more water that needs to be run off somewhere. For this project, we don't really have a lot of increase in air quality impacts because it's such a small site. I would show I would show you guys a larger site, but again, I don't want to have you all sit here for 4 minutes and just wait for the tool to be ran. So feel free to go on this and play around with it yourself. And so if I were to implement this, we have an increase, or we have actually a decrease in nitrogen, a little bit of an increase in phosphorus, and an increase in any sediment loads. And it looks like we have a decrease in the stormwater runoff impact. So moving along to the other tab, we have compliance considerations. Again, this is a good opportunity to put in a wetland restoration. And then for MS4 permit, which is, your local community's stormwater compliance with the state of Michigan, maybe you want to consider, okay, well, I do need to make sure this area, for one, doesn't flood, and two, it's in compliance with the permit. Maybe I should put in a best management practice for mitigation, and I'll be on the next tab. This showcases that it's in or near an impaired water body, meaning that water quality may be compromised. Again, community outreach, that's just a very important pillar of all the projects. You want to engage your community to make sure that the project you're implementing is what the community wants and or needs. And then also this area has a high biorarity score, meaning that the likelihood of having one or more threatened or endangered species is relatively high. So if you were to implement this project, you may need to go through NEPA or a different state agency to make sure that everything is across the board. On to mitigation. So like I said, for potential best management practices or BMPs. So let's say that this is a bad example because it was so small, but it showcases if I were to put in a bioretention, which is a small rain garden, it could make the air, it could make the nitrogen, the ozone, the PM 2.0 or the PM 10, the carbon dioxide, it can make that change, as well as the water, any nitrogen, phosphorus, or sediment loading, as well as the annual stormwater runoff impacts. And again, it differs between the different management practices. And we also have some quick definitions of these management practices. I'm sure everyone knows what trees are, but bioretentions, porous pavement, which means the water can filter through. And then extend. Yep. Okay. So with that being said, I'm going to go over to the economic considerations, and this is just kind of an ongoing tab to the mitigation section, which looks at the cost-saving benefits. So if you were to implement one of these, it showcases the costs of that and any, cost-saving measures that you might want to take. And at the very bottom, we have the PDF export. So this is really cool. Instead of having to go and print off every single page, this button right here, it exports it, and you're able to attach it to a grant application. You can share it with your colleagues and just maybe have it for, for fun. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I'm going to reshare my PowerPoint. So that was the eco-planning tool. And next up, I'm going to talk a bit about our stormwater planning tool. So this tool kind of builds off the eco-planning tool, except it dives more into the stormwater water quality aspect and water quantity as well. So this tool was created by HRC, and it's a GIS-based tool used to automate nutrient load comparisons. And this tool is just an easier way to visualize, for one, and also use EPA STEPL spreadsheet on a parcel by parcel basis. And it produces outputs for different rain events and through a variety of different BMPs as well. So again, it looks at pollutant loads, runoff volumes, and it integrates directly with the stormwater aspects of the eco-planning tool. So let's say that you are analyzing a project that you put in the eco-planning tool, but you want to learn a bit more about the water quality aspects of it, you can definitely reach out to us and we can help you analyze that using the stormwater planning tool. So of course, it supports everyone in the region, our partners, our members, and expanding stormwater management across the region. And as an example, this is a report. So at the top, we see the pollutant load comparison, different land use. So this one right here, it was, I don't think it says here, but I think, yeah, so it was existing and then we changed it to commercial. And this is what the difference in the total nitrogen load, phosphorus, the biological demand, or the biological oxygen demand, as well as the total sediment load. And then we talk a bit about the stormwater runoff. And these are the different rain events here. And in the tool, we can utilize different BMPs. So for this one, we chose a bioretention. So if you were to implement that, it shows how much reduction could be considered if you were to implement a BMP. It also shows qualitative data such as if it's near a wetland, if it's on a FEMA floodplain, if it's within 500 feet of a water body, and if so, what's that water body's name? And on the top right here, we can see the existing parcel makeup. So existing, it's 15% forest. Now, as I kind of hinted, this tool unfortunately is not public facing. It is utilized, or it utilizes GIS Pro, and it's not like publicly accessible. So we have to run it in-house on our servers. However, we have a request form, which you can scan the QR code here, and I can put that in the chat a bit later, for what for us to analyze a project. So all we're asking in the survey is a contact name who we can talk to about this project with, the location of the project, a description of the project, any attachments if you have any site plans already or any information you want to include, as well as if you want to include a BMP, if you want to install that, what that might look like in the tool, we can run that as well. And if you want to talk more about the project, we can have a follow-up meeting. So I would say, hey, let's demonstrate this tool, but unfortunately, this tool takes a while to run. As you can imagine, there are a bunch of different geoprocessing aspects, from the BMPs to the different rain events. So it does take about, I would say, a couple hours for the tool to run. So that's why we have a request form, and unfortunately, that's why it's not public facing. And I will reiterate that this tool, as of right now, it's only on a parcel by parcel basis. So we are asking folks to just put in the parcel ID or address of that parcel specifically. And then if it's multiple parcels for a certain project, we can run this tool multiple times to kind of combine those efforts into one. So which tool should you use? So if you are in the early stages of project planning, of course, use the Eco Planning tool. It shows the early indicators of potential environmental impacts that might lead to agency review, and it also takes minimal time and resources, and you can just have fun with it and click around. If you want to learn a bit more about the water quality and quantity aspects of your potential project, then reach out to us and we can run a stormwater planning tool for that. It showcases, again, the detailed modeling. It's really ideal to utilize this before moving into design and engineering phases, and it estimates different BMPs that may help alleviate some of those potential water quality and water quantity issues your project may have.